You're watching One Truth for Life, standing on truth, walking in principle, always. Truth is extreme, and to make it moderate is to lie. I do this video in honor of the thousands of fellow American citizens whose lives were destroyed in one of the most horrific acts of violence ever perpetrated on American soil. That day, the mainstream media, as you would expect, covered the day's events, and they told you what to believe about what was happening and about what had happened. It didn't take long for them to roll out the experts. We know how believable experts can be, so that they too could share their story and sell their idea about what had happened. Now at this point, some may be thinking, come on Brian, I've seen every 9/11 video. Why should I watch yours? But please stick with me, because first, I'm going to try and make this brief. And second, I'm going to give you some facts that the lamestream media, for whatever reason, may or may not have reported about the events of that day. One thing is for certain. Thousands of lives were lost, and massive destruction happened on such a large scale that it impacted global markets and adversely affected the lives of every man, woman, and child in America. And it is vital that we understand the truths about what happened that day so that we can conduct ourselves in the light of that truth. You know, it's commonly believed that only 2 skyscrapers fell in New York City that day. The South Tower at 9:59 a.m.
Both buildings are aflame. And then the building that was hit second comes tumbling down.
The North Tower fell at 10:28 a.m. But a full 6.5 hours after those skyscrapers fell, a third building fell, World Trade 7.
Known as 7 World Trade Center, it was a 47-story steel-framed skyscraper.
It didn't fall until 6.5 hours later, at 5:20 p.m. One of the interesting things about the news coverage of Building 7 is that when the BBC aired their report covering its collapse, the broadcast time was 10 p.m. London time. That's 5 p.m. New York time. 20 minutes before the building actually collapsed. Take a listen for yourself.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. As you can see behind me, the
While she's still speaking, Building 7, which was just reported as having fallen, is still standing in the New York skyline.
Now, you may have already known this, and you just push this fact aside, but I'm not going to let this die. A major news outlet, in this case the BBC, actually reported that Building 7 fell 20 minutes before the actual event. How could this be? Someone told them that the building had already collapsed, and then they reported the case, and it hadn't happened yet. Be honest with yourself, how does this happen? So just to recap so far, fact number 1 is the fact of prior knowledge. Mainstream media had reported that World Trade 7 had fallen 20 minutes before its actual collapse. I don't know, it makes you wonder if they can do that with horse races or Super Bowls or even presidential elections. Nah. Anyway, that brings us to fact number 2. Fact number 2 is proximity. You see, you've probably already guessed that there were 6 buildings in the World Trade Center complex. Use the following World Trade Center diagram to familiarize yourself with the positioning of each building.
Looking at this map, it becomes immediately apparent that proximity-wise, World Trade 7 was not a part of the World Trade Center complex or plaza. In fact, World Trade 7, having been built in 1985, was constructed on the other side of Vesey Street. Buildings 4, 5, and 6 were much closer to the collapsing Twin Towers and received much greater damage than did Building 7, and yet they did not fall.
The last fact that I want to give on this video in regard to World Trade 7 is the fact of propagation. It was and still is propagated that a 47-story steel frame skyscraper had every single one of its support columns fail at the exact same time. And the reason for this failure? Well, they say because for 6.5 hours, intense fires were allowed to burn out of control on a couple of different floors, and that's why the building fell so fast.
By contrast, in February 2005, in Madrid, Spain, the 32-story steel-framed Windsor Hotel burned with intense heat for over 20 hours on almost every floor, resulting in major damage, but no collapse.
So we're supposed to believe that a building that wasn't struck by an airplane that day, that received less damage than the buildings that were closer to the falling towers that day, a building that was reported to have fallen 20 minutes prior to its actual collapse that day, and a building who had a few fires on a couple of floors, unlike the hotel in Madrid, Spain, which burned for way more hours and way more floors, and yet it didn't fall. We are expected to believe the government's story on this. In case there's any doubt in your mind, the following clip should seal it. The following is the controlled demolition of Building 7 caught on videotape.
You hear that?
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down soon. It'll be coming down soon.
You're watching One Truth for Life, standing on truth, walking in principle, always.